Alright, so this video is for learning backbends, and I'll address a few anatomical points and some terminology that'll help you along the way. Firstly, flexion and extension. Right now my hips are in flexion and now they're in extension. What changed is the position of my femur. So this is flexion, this is extension. So it's a term applying to the leg bone. And that's important because when my hips are in extension, my glutes start to contract and it starts to help me bring the spine into extension as well. So now, spinal flexion, spinal extension. The rib cage as well is tied to the spine, so generally it's going to flex and extend, and the neck, part of the spine, is going to flex and extend. And then as well, we have axial extension. So this one gets ignored, but axial extension is getting taller. So if I just relax, I kind of am stacked along my spinal column. But if you kind of squeeze, I always say it's like you're squeezing the last of the toothpaste out of the tube. So if you rise up, and there might only be an inch or two, but I really feel the activation from my pelvis all the way up through my throat, all the way up through the center of the skull. So creating some axial extension not only improves your posture, but gives you the space in the spine and the activation up through the spine to extend with a more comfortable back bend because you've got power rather than just slouching on the spine. Slouching on the spine isn't generally going to feel so good. Back bends can feel scary sometimes for people because we can't see behind us, so we don't have a lot of information. And when the nervous system doesn't have information, it's very hesitant. So it makes you want to put on the brakes. Sometimes we don't move into potential range of motion that is safe for us because we don't feel confident to. The way to remedy that is just lots of little repetitions, lots of humble little back bends in order to get more familiar with that direction. Also, getting less attached to the visual aspect. So, for example, I'll teach tree pose with the eyes closed, or take any opportunity in your yoga practice that you can to close the eyes, because then you're used to practicing and feeling where you are in space without that visual information, which is really going to help when you can, if you need to dive back into an area that you can't see, it'll be that much more secure feeling because you still know where you are in space. Yeah, so we've got that spatial awareness, we've got hip extension, we've got axial extension, and then we've got proper spinal extension. And all of these things combine to create healthier feeling back bends. The curves, the parts of your spine that are going to tend to want to scrunch are the back of the neck because it already has this inward curve, and the lumbar spine because it already has this this inward curve. So I could move here without any kind of muscular support, any kind of axial extension. This is literally about as far as I can go, and I can feel that my spine is jammed. Where if I activate up like I did a moment ago, I've got a much stronger arc. So generally, we want to mind this part of the back because it's easy to scrunch on. We want to mind this part of the spine because it's easy to scrunch on. So the first thing I'm going to get you to do is to start to power up the rib cage. So notice how my chin is fairly low. I'm kind of giving myself a double chin, and as I draw my throat up and back, I'm trying to get the back of my rib cage to peel open. And we'll see that in the middle of the throat of our flow, but I just want to kind of point that out to you. I'm also going to stabilize around the core, not so much crunching, although my abs are involved, but just thinking of stabilizing so that as I arch back, I'm not just blurt. Yeah, if I don't use my muscles to control this scrunch here, I'm drawing up through neutral. I'm creating that axial extension, then I'm getting my ribs to act, then I still have that double chin action. Now my head is behind my pelvis. Now I can finally release it back and I don't feel scrunched here, and I don't feel scrunched here. Yeah. So we'll start to slowly practice. We're going to use a couple of props today. You don't have to have official yoga blocks. In fact, these are going to be a little bit aggressive. So if you are using yoga bricks, I would suggest putting a towel over them or a jumper, or maybe using some soft pillows, using a rolled up towel. These nice low squishy ones are fine, but they might not give you enough boost. So I'm actually going to use my Zafu. So the nice thing about a home practice is we have loads of little household objects which you could use as yoga toys. A rolled up bath towel, it might be just the ticket, or a foam roller. We're also going to use a little bit of wall space. So before we get into that, I'm going to start you on the floor. And the knees are bent. And just, again, clarifying, this is the back of the neck is the cervical spine, and the back of the waist is the lumbar spine. So I'm going to bring my hands behind my head and gently using my thumbs to massage the cervical spine, and especially bring some awareness behind the ears, the skull, the jaw, the neck, and kind of pull my neck a little bit taller. So I'm creating some passive axial extension here. The cervical spine is nice and long and neutral. I'm just going to leave my hands here for now. I'm going to let my elbows relax open, the chest broadens out. And then I'm just going to feel the lumbar curve, the back of the waist. And I'm just going to establish awareness of the breath before I go anywhere else. Maybe the eyes float closed for a second. Excuse me. So the kind of breath that we're using is gathering the muscles around the hips, so pelvic floor, low belly, gently wrapping the sides and the back up to the structure of the pelvis, which means the breath is mostly going to be happening in the rib cage. It's not that I'm being really tight and restrictive. There's not great effort here, but it's not a deep, low down belly breath as if we were getting ready to practice pranayama or if we're sitting for meditation. Just gently firing up the core and thinking about using that muscular support up to the spine in a light way. I'm going to bring the tongue up to the back of the throat. So if I weren't talking, I'd be making a quiet ha sound the whole time as I slightly halfway close the glottis and regulate the movement of the breath through the back of the throat. I'm going to start to pulse each breath a little more deeply. Inhaling, seeking to really mobilize the ribs. And then the exhale, zipping right from the base, like I'm zipping an internal jumper and drawing the core, knitting closed, really thoroughly completing the exhale. It's not a crunch. Inhale. Again, yes, the abdominals are responding, but so are the sides of the waist, so is the back. So the net effect is that I'm really wringing out my exhale. I've completely exhaled and it's not moving my spine anywhere. I'm getting narrower. I'm kind of corseting closed. Inhale. And then this time I'm going to deliberately crunch the belly and the lumbar has flattened onto the ground. So my pelvis is tucked under. I'm going to inhale, open the belly, exaggerate the back, the lumbar curve. So I could slide my hand underneath the back of my waist. And now as I exhale and crunch, I can no longer slide my hand under the back of the waist. The head is staying on the floor. The elbows are staying nice and wide. I'm just rotating the hips. in rhythm with the breath. So each inhale brings you into spinal extension. Each exhale slightly brings you into spinal flexion as far as the lumbar is concerned. And then we'll continue this conversation. So note, before we go anywhere else, note that it's the hips that are rotating. It's the spine that's moving. So I'm going tailbone up, tailbone down. This is subtle. This is subtly bringing me into hip flexion. So if you notice that it kind of closes the front of my hips here as I extend the spine. So we're moving into hip flexion, spinal extension. And then as I crunch, I'm opening the front of the hip socket, so my hips are extending a little bit and my spine is flexing a little bit. And then we're going to continue that action and bring it into some proper crunches. So the next time I close my belly and slightly extend the front of the hips, I'm going to crunch and lift my head off the floor. I'm going to try to keep my elbows good and wide, so I don't want to be able to see my elbows. And then I'm going to drop the head, relax, rotate the pelvis, exhale, crunch, lift the head, relax, returning the curve of the lumbar as I rotate the pelvis, crunch, lift the head, and so on. So we're really dissecting these actions. I'm first moving the hips, then moving the rib cage and the head. And then again, as I come back down, I'm moving the rib cage and the head, and then I'm moving the pelvis. So lower body curls, upper body relaxes, lower body relaxes. Lower body curls, upper body curls. Upper body relaxes, lower body relaxes. And play with a couple of these. Still regulating the movement with the breath. And even just these subtle movements, you might feel a little bit longer through the spine. You're definitely going to get more dexterity through the movement of your spine. If you're one that tends to have back spasms, this is a really good movement to get to know and to master, because the more you can control effectively the movement of the spine and the more strength and awareness you can build up, the more confident your nervous system feels. And regulation of pain, regulation of tone along the spine is very much regulated by how confident the nervous system feels with your spinal situation. Yeah. So we've gotten to know that movement, and now we're going to take that same movement and I'm going to mindfully roll up to sitting. And I'm going to take a very small object. So I happen to have a low, soft yoga brick. You could fold up a towel, you could use a small cushion, really anything. And I'm going to put it behind my shoulder blades. And we're going to do the same movement again. So again, it's right where it's going to help my rib cage extend, the upper part of the back extend. And I'm going to bring my hands behind my head. Now, if you have a really tight rib cage, if your head does not land on the ground again, that's fine. Make sure that this feels good and use your hands as a landing pad, and use the hands to gently pull yourself a little bit taller. Now hopefully your head can land here. And maybe the elbows land too, and we're already creating some really nice extension through the rib cage. You're just going to take a couple of breaths here. Again, if your head doesn't land on the floor, just make sure it feels comfortable and not pinch you in your shoulders or your neck. And make sure you're using your hands to keep the cervical spine nice and long so that you're not clamping your neck. And then I'm going to start the same way. You'll find it hard to get those rotations in the hips at first, because now there's a little less leeway in the spine. But this is where the interesting work is starting to happen. So now I can rotate my pelvis without disturbing the alignment in my rib cage. And now I'm going to, again, curl the hips under, curl the upper body up, release the upper body, and release the hips. Curl the lower body, curl the upper body, release the upper body, release the hips. Curl the lower body, curl the upper body, release the lower body, or the upper body, and then release the lower body. Just playing a couple times here, making sure that this works for you. And you can stay here. You don't have to take it any further. Or if this is feeling good and you're starting to awaken some movement in the rib cage and the spine, especially as I mentioned earlier, we're really good at rounding forward in the rib cage. So this might be bringing some welcome variation of movement and opening and lengthening. You might feel the shoulders kind of decongest and the neck kind of decongest here. Maybe dropping some tension in the jaw, the face, the scalp. You might, if you feel good, roll up and take it up to the next level. So as I mentioned earlier, these are a bit aggressive. If you use these, you'll kind of wind up on a sharp edge on your spine. It's not as nice. I'm going to choose to take a nice soft object. I'm going to take this on its edge so it's a little bit higher. You could use a foam roller, something that's round or padded, or if you have a brick, you can pad your brick. So I'm going to take this to the back of my shoulder blades, and now my head is flying in the air and I'm using the adjustment of my hands to pull my neck nice and long. Again, I want to avoid being able to see my elbows, so my elbows are consciously wide so that I'm not crunching here. And I'm pulling myself up and I'm getting some nice release across the pecs as well, and my thumbs are massaging the back of the neck. And while I hang out here, cradling my head, again, I'm just going to see how much rotation in the hips I can get. And then after experimenting here, and you might find the bigger the movement in the spine, the less available variation in the hips. But finding even a little bit of movement, even if it's just muscular action and you don't see much from the outside. And then again, I'm going to curl the lower body under, and then I'm going to curl the upper body. Now I'm going to relax my upper body, and then I relax the lower body. Curl the lower body, curl the upper body. Relax the upper body, relax the lower body. Curl the lower body, curl the upper body. Relax the upper body, relax the lower body. And explore a few more times. Now you can go further than this. This is about as far as I'm going to demonstrate today. This is just a little warm up, and this is getting us to understand the segments, upper body and lower body, and how they build up some nice backbends. This is also pointing out to us how to create a full body extension, you gotta extend the hips and extend the spine. But here we're just gaining control of those two things. Good. And you can mouth open for a second if this feels nice. Eventually rolling on up. Good. And then I'll swing you around to all fours for a second. Warm up the hands, as we usually do before we head towards our sun salutations, before dancing through plank, upward dog, downward dog. And so pointing out that right now my hips are in flexion. And we'll come to all fours and reconnect with the breath. So right now my spine is pretty neutral and my hips are in flexion, meaning my femur is closing in. And then I'm going to rotate the pelvis a little bit here. So again, I can rotate the pelvis, and this is also moving the spine. And this starts to become cat and cow. As you let the head join in with the movement, exhale, press and curl. Inhale, as up, tailbone up. So I'm going to curl my hips under, and then release that curl, go tailbone up, curl tailbone down. You could also say sit bones up or sit bones down. But this is affecting the whole spinal posture. And then we'll stop here. So notice that I've created hip flexion and spinal extension. So it's not that you can't extend the spine if the hips are flexed, but different poses call for different combinations. So right now I've got spinal extension and hip flexion, where you'll see in a second we can create different combinations. But I'm going to curl up, and I'm just going to sink back to child's pose, and I'm just going to wiggle out the spine. And while I'm here with the hips nice and low, I'm going to take both hands over to the left. So this is a lateral movement. I'm going to take both hands over to the right. It's creating a lateral stretch through the side body. You just play a couple more times, nothing major. One side and then the other. And then I'm going to come back to my first slide. And then I'm going to drop an elbow and then the other, and notice how that slight seesaw affects the little spinal conversation. Then I'm going to turn to the other side, create as much lateral movement as feels good, and then tick-tock my elbows. And notice how that just kind of changes the spiderweb conversations. And we'll lift it back to downward dog. The hands are forward, nice big grips. Push the floor. Start to lift up to downward dog as you pedal off the legs. First time, stay on the head of the calves and the hamstrings. And then from this downward dog, I'm going to roll up onto my tippy toes. And then I'm going to curl under. So I'm squeezing my bum, I'm squeezing my low belly. I'm going to roll forward, and that roll creates my plank. And I'm just going to breathe here. If plank is too much for you, you can always drop to half plank. I still have that curl under. And then I'm going to roll back, downward dog. Up on the tippy toes, curl forward. Plank, just warming up everything. And then press and dive back. And then finally, I'm going to roll up, I'm going to curl forward. I'm going to try to plank and hovercraft all the way down on the floor. If you got to drop your knees early and melt, then that's no problem. We'll all meet up down here. And just gently lengthen the legs back. I'm going to tuck my chin, rest my forehead on my mat, so I'm really consciously lengthening the cervical spine. I'm going to take the hands out to either side. I'm popping up on my fingerprints. I'm just going to goof around with the elbows and the shoulders. And take a couple of big breaths here. I'm going to close the eyes, so again, I'm getting more tactile with my back. I'm getting less visual information. I'm increasing my spatial awareness. And I'm going to keep my eyes closed as I loop my shoulders together. Gently peel my head off the floor. Open your eyes and have a peek. My neck is still long, so I'm using my deep neck extensors through the back of the throat rather than looking up and clamping the neck. And then I'm going to exhale, relax down. Engaging the legs, the glutes, the belly as you lift, and then melt down. So imagine picking yourself up with the back of the tongue. Hopefully you'll feel a little deeper activation going on up the back of the rib cage. I'm getting some axial extension here. So I'm nice and tall. And I lengthen up. My hands are just barely assisting. I'm not using the arms much at all. Just rising and falling with the breath and really awakening along the spine, getting a better mental map of my spine. Imagine the curve of the back of your legs, the curve of your glutes, the curve of the back of your waist, the curve of the rib cage, the curve of the neck. Good. And then I'm going to release down. I'm going to open the eyes. And I'm just going to come up to cobra hands. So my thumbs are down on my rib cage. I'm going to grip and pull. So I'm not looking to straighten the arms yet. My eyes are going to wind up just past the mat. So I'm not doing this and clamping my neck. My eyes are just past the mat. I'm lifting through the back of the throat. And I'm just going to swim my legs a couple times just to really wake up my glutes. And then I'm going to scissor them a couple times again just to wake up the back side of the body. And now we're creating hip extension as well as spinal extension. So your glutes are your major hip extensors. If you just rep the legs a couple times, it's your backside that extends the femurs. Good. So with that in mind, I'm going to grip. I'm going to get tall first, like I'm pulling myself out the top of the mat. And then I'm slowly picking myself up through the back of the throat. And my glutes are lightly engaged and my belly is lightly engaged. So I'm getting really tall. Upward dog is a really fabulous back bend, and we kind of tend to dance right through it in class. So I'm going to level my jaw. I'm really going to study how upward dog is feeling today. Now, if this feels collapsed in the back of your waist and your lumbar, check a couple of things. Are your legs engaged? Is your glute helping to roll the pelvis down? Are your glutes helping to extend the hips, or are you just kind of belly flopping down into the hips? You can zip your low belly a little bit, kind of like you're zipping a tight pair of jeans. That's going to help your axial extension here as you pull through, straight up through the crown of the head. So notice I'm not even looking up yet. Then looking up is a bonus. And I'm going to take my throat up and back, up and back, up and back. And then eventually as I look up, you might find that there's a really nice stretch generated on that V-shaped muscle on either side of your throat. And that one, that V-shaped muscle, sternocleidomastoid, great muscle name. That one can really get shortened with our common technic kind of patterns. So I'm going to take a moment to massage. Chewing the jaw helps here as well. By now your arms are starting to feel it. By now, if your glutes have a short attention span, they might have softened out. Reignite. Good. I'm slowly going to ooze it back down, ooze it back down, ooze it back down. Good. And again, axial extension. Engage the lower body. Slowly peel up. So in upward dog, we've got hip extension and spinal extension. And then I'm going to look down, tuck and dive, roll my way back to a downward dog, and just enjoy that release and lengthening down the spine, paddle off the legs. Big deep breaths. Shake off the head. Good. So, bouncy knees. Even if you're flexible, I don't want to see straight legs. You're going to walk your hands back, back, back to those bouncy knees so that your first forward fold is nice and soft and melted. Your first forward fold is more interested in continuing to increase your awareness of your spine. And now you're thinking about how well your spine is melting and lengthening and hanging with gravity. And you should have room to walk your hands over to the left or walk your hands over to the right. And create some little gentle lateral movements. And even if you usually like coming up with a flat back, just for this one, just to get more sequential rolling spinal skills, I'm going to keep soft bouncy knees like I'm on a trampoline. I'm going to keep my head and my arms pretty passive as I slowly zip through the core. Use your hamstrings and your bum to start rolling you up. Slowly, slowly stacking the vertebrae until you peel, push the floor, eventually rising all the way back up to standing. We find ourselves standing for the first time in practice today. I'm going to roll the arms and the biceps nice and wide on my way up. Turn the palms to face each other. And just play with the feet here. So thinking about axial extension, I'm getting as tall as I can, and I've got a little invisible brick on my head as I lift and drop my heels. And then I'm going to ground my footprints, making, hopefully I'm neutral. If you're not neutral, if the knees and the toes have to turn out, make sure they're both doing the same thing. But hopefully you're skiing straight forward. And as I sit into lightning pose, I'm first going to get this axial extension up. I'm going to use my hamstrings and my glutes. Notice how I'm kind of sinking back, and I'm going to, like, my hamstrings are pulling me down into my squat, so my legs are spring-loaded. And this asks me to really become a little more aware of my upper back. I'm using my belly, I'm using my hips, I'm drawing it down, I'm lengthening the back of my lumbar, and I'm awakening the upper back, and I'm spring-loading those legs a little more. So this is a lot more activated in the core than this, which is easy to do, just sticking your bum back and dropping your belly. So I'm going to attack and sink into those strong legs. And then waterfall all the way down. Allow the hamstrings to melt out. I'm going to look forward, and I'm going to walk the hands back out to downward dog. And this time we'll take a smoother path through plank, upward dog, downward dog, and just really savor the spinal awareness. In fact, you could do these with the eyes closed so that you're feeling it more than looking around the room. Then take your right leg up into the air. I'm going to take a moment here to really keep that flying leg super engaged, pulling you back off the shoulders, and your left foot is going to lift and drop on the ground. So we've been mostly in the spine. I'm going to say hi to that left leg. And then bring that foot back down and switch sides. Take your left leg up. Really, really sparky fly that leg. Lift and drop your right heel on the floor. And bring that foot back down. And then from this dog, take that right leg right back up. Zip and curl. Step up into the hands. Drop your back knee, flatten out the foot. Roll yourself up. I'm going to bring my thumbs down behind my neck. I'm going to pull myself tall just like I did on the floor. And again, like you've got a brick on your head, you're sprouting up nice and tall. I'm aware of my neck, and I'm aware of this curve here. So I'm going to maybe creep forward a little bit, but notice it's really easy to make a compressive kind of back bend here. And I can already feel the scrunch here. I'm going to zip. I'm going to use my bum to roll my hip down. So there's a real downward rotation of the hips. This is called a posterior rotation of the hip. I'm going to start to flex my hip instead of my spine for the moment. So this is going to give me a little more core awareness. And now I'm going to awaken my rib cage and my upper back. So this looks real neutral, but I'm actually getting some powerful rib extension, some rib reprogramming, some neck reprogramming, and I'm starting to open this hip. So this is like a really simple recipe to counter all the sitting that we've been doing. And then I'm going to take my arms up into the air. And if it's an option, curl up your back foot, see if you can step, and see if you can squeeze back enough to float that back leg up off the floor. So I'm going to draw it and float it up. And then I'm going to pulse a couple times. I'm just going to leave my arms up in the air because I'm really thinking about the static rib cage. In fact, you can bring your hands back behind your head if that's a better focal point for you. And you're just going to see if some of you can drop your knee to the ground, great. If not, don't worry about it. I'm looking to stay vigilant of my hip alignment because you're going to want to do that and pop a back bend. Good. I'm just testing. I'm going to drop that leg back down. I'm going to mount the hands to the floor. I'm going to drag the leg nice and long as my heart pulls forward. My shoulders are nice and wide away from my neck. I still have that lift through that little ha sound in the back of the throat. Really lengthening out those hip flexors. And then zip. Pick up the back knee. Push the floor. Kick back up to the sky. Pedal off the legs. And we'll switch, taking the left leg up. Up on the tippy toes, press and zip. Step up into the hands, drop the back knee. Flatten out that, or actually you don't have to flatten out that foot because we're going to come up. But my thumbs are going to point down. I'm going to massage the back of the neck. I'm going to get myself nice and tall. You can eke out a little bit if you want, but I'm really focusing on that posterior tuck, squeezing the back side, opening the front side, lifting myself tall. So there's a real front body, back body sandwiching going on. Reprogramming the rib cage, reprogramming my neck. I'm going to try to remain aware of this core position. Take my arms up, keep that spinal extension, and then see, can I lift myself up? Maybe staying here, maybe just traveling a couple of times. I'm going to do my darndest not to let this happen. I'm going to keep the zip, and as I drop, boop, and maybe bounce that knee off the floor, tap a couple of times, tap a couple of times. Each time, getting a little more control. Now, if that kills your knee, you don't have to hit the floor. You might be up here just pulsing a little bit and you're still getting the same awareness going. Nice heated work. I'm going to flatten out the foot. I'm going to pull through the fingertips. Nice long neck as I reach forward. Softening that right leg back, dropping the hip flexors, iliacus and psoas, dropping the top of the quads. And then picking up the knee, pushing the floor, kicking back up to the sky, and pedaling off the legs. And again, take your dance through plank, upward dog, downward dog. And rolling up. And pressing back. Good. So we spent a good amount of time getting details in the legs, the hip positions, hip flexion, hip extension, spinal flexion, spinal extension. I'm going to address the shoulders a little bit because they're really key. And again, we're going to take an object. It can be a cushion, it can be a brick, hopefully something wider. So if you have 2 yoga bricks, great. If you have a towel, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a large object. It's just a reference point, really. So I'm going to put my hands on my object, and I happen to have yoga blocks, so that's what I'm going to use. But this time, notice my bum stays in the air, so I'm flexing my hips, but I'm extending my spine. I'm going to gently drop my forehead to the floor, and I'm going to keep pushing those blocks away. So if you have a very small object and your elbows are on the ground, just make sure you aren't resting on your elbows. I'd rather see the elbows up in the air as you push that object away. So you're constantly getting some reach through the spine. You're just constantly getting some axial extension. And notice it'd be really easy to just belly flop here and make my lumbar do most of the curve. So I'm actually going to zip a little bit. I'm going to lift my belly a bit so that there's less lumbar curve so that more of the rib cage has to move. Because we know that it's easy to just slouch on the back of your waist. So I'm really long, I'm really actively pushing that object. I'm going to look forward if possible so that my chin comes to the ground. Now if that's too much on your neck, because that is a lot of cervical extension, if that doesn't suit you, you can just leave the forehead on the floor. And there's still a ton of interesting work. I'm not totally ragdolling. I'm pushing those objects under my hands, and I'm slightly zipping the belly so I'm not just slouching in the back of the waist. Good. This is called puppy pose. I think it's a fabulous pose for thinking about how the shoulders integrate into your back bends. And then slowly going to roll up, roll up, roll up. Walk the knees forward again. And you can just leave them off to the side for the moment. Good. And come back up to downward dog. Let's take your right leg up into the air. Roll and curl. Step into the hands. Drop your back knee. Peel your way on up. So I'm going to turn to face you guys for a second. You've got the right leg in front. I'm going to take my arms up, and I'm going to, if my left leg is back, I'm going to slightly step forward. I'm going to zip. I'm going to think about that tuck of the pelvis so that I'm opening my hip flexor, zipping my belly a little bit, get nice and tall. And then my right hand's going to catch my left wrist. And I'm going to like pick myself up. So I'm assisting this axial extension, and my shoulder rises a little bit as well. And then you're going to lean to your right hand side so you start to get some lateral movement. And the more I get tall through my center line, the more I can arch over. I really want to watch that I still have my glutes strong behind me. So I'm not just belly flopping down and scrunching the back of the waist. But you want this to be an arc to the side. Good. Come on up. Release it down. You can step on back to downward dog. Give it a little kick to the sky. Both feet on the floor. Take your left leg up. Roll and curl. Step into the hands. So your left foot's going to come in. Drop the right knee down. As you roll up, you're going to take the arms, swivel biceps up, palms up on your way up. You can deepen your lunge a little bit. But I'm really, instead of just, yay, I'm curling down, getting some hip extension, keeping the spine pretty neutral, reaching up. Then, if I'm stretching my right leg, I'm catching my right wrist. I'm going to pull myself up nice and tall, and then arc. And I'm really thinking about stretching the side of my rib cage, rather than letting this be the wrong kind of back bend, the slouchy kind of back bend. So there's a lot of concentration in my hips to provide that foundation so that I can get tall and arc over. And peel back up, and release down. Good. Pick up that back knee, kick up to the sky, pedal off the legs. And again, not totally losing the heat. Roll through plank, upward dog, downward dog. Dancing through the spine. Do this with the eyes closed if you can spare it. Feeling where you are, do what feels good. Good. And again, walk your hands back to the feet. Grounding the footprint. Bouncing knees so you can really focus on surrendering the spine. Push the floor slowly, vertebra disc, roll up, roll up, roll up. Inhale, palms, biceps open on your way to reaching overhead. And the hands come back to center. Good, so I mentioned earlier we might use a little wall space. And here's where we might use a little wall space. So this is similar to what we did on the floor with the bricks, except now I'm pushing the wall. So I'm starting, a couple of footprints away from the wall. My hands are going to be about rib cage height, so not too high, not too low. I'm going to bend my knees and start to send my bum back as I push the wall. So I need to step a little further back. I'm going to keep stepping back until I feel like my head can drop through my arms and I'm hanging like a hammock. I'm hanging like a rope bridge. Constantly pushing the wall. Thinking about reaching through the shoulders, externally rotating. I've got a really good video on shoulder rotations, so finding that alignment there. But again, be interested in what the hips are doing. So if I just go tailbone up and drop my belly, and I'm doing it wrong on purpose right now, I've got a major sway in my lumbar. I'm going to tuck my bum under a little bit so that the stretch is happening through the rib cage and the shoulders more than just collapsing in the lumbar. Or you could also get a little more technical and rotate the hips here. So I'm arching and curling within the context of dropping my head through and getting that nice stretch. And this is actually so educational and lengthening. It's like a cat-cow on the wall. We'll take 2 more breaths here. Instead of arching and curling, instead of cat-cowing on the wall, just maintaining a steady pose. Breathing and observing. Hopefully you're getting even longer through the spine. Nice long reach through the rib cage. Notice how there's a constant soft bend in the knees. I'm not even worried about a hamstring stretch. And then I'm going to gather up through the core. I'm going to walk forward. Good. And while we're here, I'm going to push against the wall. My thumb's going to turn up. And I'm slowly going to retract my shoulder back as I push through the thumb, and my heart moves in the opposite direction. And just take this nice, delicious release here. Reaching back. I'm thinking about the legs grounding. Getting that tall spine, reprogramming my rib cage and my neck. Still lifting through that little ha sound as I look over the far shoulder. And I have to turn away from you guys, but I'm going to take my other hand to the wall. Thumbs up, drive that thumb print, square the hips. Your heart moves away from the thumb. Draw up nice and tall, axial extension, picking yourself up at the back of the throat, looking over the free shoulder. Good. And then come on back and release down. So at the back of your mat, inhale, reach up. Think about using your hamstrings and your glutes to pull you down as the upper body reaches up. A nice, powerful lightning pose. Mount the hands to the floor. And we'll walk out to downward facing dog. And we'll take one more dance through plank, upward dog, downward dog, eyes closed, nice sinuous roll through the spine. Again, the more confident and aware you are of your potential spinal movement, the more confident your nervous system will be, the more comfortable your back bends will feel. And then I'm going to ooze you on down to the floor, and we're going to have a look at bow because it's just such a great pose. So I'm going to pull the legs back. I'm going to bring my thumbs nice and low. I'm just going to cobra. And I'm going to get that axial extension, so I'm pulling my head forward. My legs are engaged. I've got a balance between inner thigh, outer thigh, glutes, and belly. And then I'm going to take my hands up off the floor, and then I'm going to bend my knees. And then I'm going to reach back. And even if you can grab your feet, don't grab your feet yet. I want you to think about staying here and breathing and being really comfortable in the muscular action of your bow. Because if this doesn't feel good, there's no point in grabbing your feet and trying to kick. So you can get a little more movement back. So I'm going to retract my shoulders and lift my heart. Make sure that your neck is nice and happy. I'm not looking up and clapping my cervical spine. And see, the most interesting point of all, see if you can raise those knees off the floor, maybe both at a time, maybe one at a time, but really using those glutes to extend the hip. This is going to connect to deepening the activation of your spinal muscles. And then slowly release down, head on flat hands. Just tick-tock the heels. Take a couple of nice big relaxed belly breaths, let the core go for a moment. So for those of you at home, if you have spinal issues and doing something big like pulling into a proper bow pose is too much, just taking that prep is so therapeutic. Like, that's so much work. And it's so beneficial getting comfortable there, strengthening the posterior chain, strengthening your spinal muscles, getting comfortable reaching back. Then grabbing a bow is a bonus. So I'm going to tuck my chin and pull my legs back. I'm going to draw myself up into a little cobra. I'm going to take the hands off the floor. I'm going to bend the knees. I'm going to reach back. So again, hanging out here, just pursuing good muscular activation and breath is a great place to hang out. If you can catch your toes, lovely. If you can bring your hands down to the heels so that you can kick through the ankles, this is even better. You can probably notice the change in my shoulders. As I kick my heels, it draws my shoulders a little further back. You have more activity in the legs. And then I'm going to make sure that my belly is still engaged. I feel like it's very easy to push your belly down into the floor and kind of distend your belly. I want to lift my belly button into my spine, even if that looks like a smaller pose. I'm going to keep the kick and the pull, using the kick to stretch through the chest, and then the action that a lot of us miss, I'm going to use those glutes and those hamstrings to try to get the knees off the floor. So there's tons of work here. It's more than just hopefully slapping and grabbing your feet and then kicking to pull your shoulders. That's not as sustainable though. Breathing and exploring. Using the kick to open the chest. Using your glutes to raise the knees. One more big breath here. And slowly melting down. Letting go of the grip. Head on flat hands. When you let go of that pose, hopefully you feel heated. Not like you're recovering from overstretching. So again, emphasizing the muscular support in your back bends, building awareness, being able to move back behind you with spatial awareness rather than feeling like you can't see where you're going. So I'm going to lengthen my legs back. My thumbs are nice and low in my rib cage. I'm going to grip and pull and grip and pull. And take the hands off the floor, so I've already got loads of power in my upper body. I'm going to bend my knees, so I've got loads of power in the lower body. I'm in hip extension and spinal extension. I'm going to reach back, walk my hands hopefully down to my ankles. If you're just up on your toes, that's cool too. If you can walk to your ankles, kick your heels, open the soles of the feet. Really start to loop your shoulders back, actively squeeze your shoulders back. Then check in, you've got a little zip in the belly. Then check in, see if you can kick to lift and lever your bow. It should feel like a nice opening into the rib cage. Then raising your knees off the floor, using your strong backside. Glutes are one of the biggest muscles in the body. And I've got lovely hip extension and spinal extension. Retracting the shoulders as we open across the chest. And gently release it down. Head on flat hands. Tick-tock your heels. So, just as an experiment, I'm going to take my feet a little bit wide so my toes can feel the edges of the mat. My left foot's at the left corner of the mat, right foot's at the right corner of the mat. I'm going to bring my hands down, thumbs by the rib cage, and I'm going to pull into this slightly wide alignment upward dog. And I'm going to zip my belly a little bit, I'm going to curl my bum under a little bit, and I'm really going to pull up proud through the chest. So I'm climbing right up through the pelvic floor. I'm tucking my chin, getting a long axial extension through the neck. And then with this wide-legged variation, I'm going to look to my left shoulder. I chose my left shoulder first. And then this is going to slightly drop me down into my right hip. And this really deepens the release for psoas. So you might feel a big stretch kind of in behind your intestines. Not losing that height. I'm really thinking about picking myself up by the throat as I look to the left. And then come on back. And I'm using my glutes and I'm making sure I'm not just hanging from my shoulders. There's a ton of isometric work here. I'm going to look over the right hand side. Gripping the floor, pulling through. And as I look to my right hand side, I'm slightly twisting my whole body and shifting down into that left hip. Feeling a big stretch radiate behind my intestines on the left hand side, getting deeper into the upper end of the psoas. And then come on back down. Good. So if that one feels a little pinchy in the back of your waist, there's a few reasons why that could be, but there's a very common reason, most likely. That's because the hip flexors are tight. That's a big stretch that I just did, that wide-legged upward dog. You might feel it echo in the back a little bit. The deeper you breathe, the more comfortable your spine's going to be with that. Not avoiding strong sensation. You're just getting to know your own limits and your own boundaries, and slowly, it's always going to be startling as you expand your range of motion. And since we can't see behind us, and there's all that fresh sensation, back bends, there's so many reasons why we maybe avoid them or maybe think we can't do as much as we potentially could. So I'm going to play one more time with that and just see. You can always back off if you're feeling like you're done. So I'm going to grip. I'm going to energize the legs. I'm going to roll up. I'm consciously creating hip extension and then thoracic extension, getting nice and tall up through the throat, feeling powerful and lengthened out. I'm going to look over my left-hand side, slightly shifting my whole body, dropping into the right hip. And making sure that this doesn't become a dead belly flop. Deep, slow breath, massaging the nervous system. Come on back. I'm going to look over the right shoulder, shifting and slowly dropping down into the left hip, making sure that this doesn't become just a sleepy belly flop. Square it back to center. Again, melting down, melting down. This time I'm going to rest my head on flat hands. I'm going to tick-tock the heels. Now, if you feel inspired to pursue more back bends, feel free to pause the video, head off on your adventure. If you feel inspired, please follow that inspiration. Otherwise, I'm going to start to gentle you down and wind you down. Notice I'm tick-tocking my heels. Taking big inhales. I'm going to try to expand down into my belly. I'm going to massage my spine from the inside out. I'm going to bring the legs back in a little bit. I'm going to bring my hands back to cobra alignment. Peeling enough upward dog. I'm pretty quickly zipping the belly, coming on back to all fours, and just taking tasty little arches and curls just to start to slow down that extension. Now it's normal to feel the work kind of echoing in the spine a little bit. Deepen the breath. Maybe just mindfully playing with arches and curls, and maybe you're going to get a little more quirky and get some lateral movements and kind of barrel roll through the spine here. Good. And then slowly dive back to a child's pose. Again, letting the breath move freely, massaging back into the spine with each inhale and exhale. Feel free to chill here or take any variation you want with the shoulders. Or you might even take a few lateral twists, just like we did at the beginning of class, gently exploring and massaging, soothing the spine, talking to your nervous system with deep, slow breaths. And gently curling back down. Zip in the belly. Eventually, when you're ready, I'm going to swing the legs forward. Give the knees a little hug as I rock from side to side. Good. So right now my knees are in my chest and I'm rocking. And I'm going to keep doing that, and I'm going to add a nice little release for glute medius, for the low back. If you're one that tends to carry tension in your low back, this one's for you. So I'm going to make a diamond shape with my hands. However, my hands are going to be pretty far away from each other. If your thumbs and your index fingers touch, it's just going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be sitting on your knuckles. So I'm rocking. I'm going to take this pretty wide shape and put it underneath the back of one hip and then underneath the back of the other hip. And it's generously apart so that I'm not like putting my fingers under my spine and my sacrum. But as I tick from side to side, notice how my hip is coming all the way up off of my hand. And then I roll onto those knuckles. And so I'm rolling my glutes onto the hand. I'm starting to slow them down. We did so much hip extension. If you tend to get a bit grippy in your low back, this gentle twisting is helping the postural muscles to relax out. Softening glute medius if it tends to get grumpy. This is a really nice one. And eventually, I'm going to take the hands out from under my tail, turn the palms face up, slowly inch my feet across the floor. Really listen to the last little third or last little quarter of movement here as your legs approach straight. And we lengthen out the front of the hips once more. It's an easy range of motion, so you guys did way more than this. But just feel that spaciousness in the front of the hips. Feel the length through the spine. Hopefully the back of your waist is nice and relaxed and lengthened out. The rib cage is open. The cervical spine is nice and lengthened out. The head is dropped on the floor. As you surrender the limbs to the floor and let go of any breath technique. Stay connected to the spine. I'm going to borrow this relaxation to feel a little more integrated from tailbone up through the skull. And just stay.